we got a really cool episode for you. Really simple for most DIYers and mobile mechanics. Again, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We're trying to put as much good content out there as we possibly can that makes it really simple for you guys. So we're on the 3.8 supercharged Monte-Carlo, and we're just going to be changing the front and the back brakes. We'll go ahead and take you through that process right now. First and foremost, what you're going to want to use is your 19mm socket. And what I like to do is I like to break all of the lug nuts on both sides, since I'm going to be doing brakes on both sides. So after I break each of these loose, and that's it, we're going to jack the car up all at once. I'm jacking the car up right in the center, right where the front frame goes, and then I'll go ahead and put my jack stands on the sides. Now, right here where this pinch weld is, and I also do one on the opposing side, which is over there. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my impact drill to take off these bolts, the lug nuts. Now, one of my other videos I stated about this knee creeper being a must-have for your mobile mechanics or DIYers who work on your vehicles a lot, because this bad boy will save your knees, and it has a little tool tray piece right here as well. So go ahead and remove this tire, and I'll just set it out the way. So all we're going to have to do is compress the piston in, and then take these two bolts off. In this case, we have these plastic cover in the way, so we can't get our C-clamp on. So we're going to loosen this nut and this nut to take this piece off. I got my AC Delco automatic ratchet wrench. We'll loosen that one up. Then we'll loosen this one up. And these tabs will just slide right off. Now that that is off and out the way, we can go ahead and get our C-clamp on these brakes. I got my C-clamp on the brake, one on this side, and I have it anywhere on the back end. And all you're going to do is just rotate this to the right until you see your brake pad start separating from where the caliper is. Once you can do that, it'll be ready to come off. But you actually want to push it in as much as possible so you don't have to worry about compressing the piston in a whole lot after you take the brake off, which this would be the piston right back here. Now we're about to take off these two bolts which hold the caliper in place. It's a 15mm bolt for this. I'm going to use my automatic ratchet wrench. Now in some cases it's not strong enough, so I'm just going to have to break it loose with this one first. Alright, now that one's broken, and we'll do the same thing here. Now you could use a hammer, but I don't feel like going to my truck to use the hammer. So now that I got those two things loose, I'll get them the rest of the way off with this automatic ratchet wrench. What that's gonna do is make quick work of the job so you're not out here for too long. Now on this vehicle, as you take these out, these are their slider pins. A lot of people forget to put grease on these. You're gonna want to grease these up so it makes it easier for the brakes to go in and out when they're in use. And a lot of times these can get rusty and then it's like impossible to even get them out. So now that the caliper's off, we'll just set this right on top of the rotor for the time being. And we can see that the brake pads are really low. We'll compare them to the new ones, but look at this side. This one is just completely gone. Right here we got the new pads. We're gonna go ahead, cut this thing open right quick. And before you go trying to put the pads on, you want to make sure that they're actually the right size. And the best way to do that is actually just to compare them side by side. See if they're the same length, height, and you can completely tell the difference. This one has no pad, and this one has a lot of pad on it. So these brake pads were really worn out. So these are the right ones, and we're gonna go ahead and move on with the installation of the new pads. Now, the customer supplied the parts, so they didn't get the pads that have new hardware. So we're gonna use the old hardware. So all we're gonna do is grease the back a bit and the contact points on the side on both pads, and we're gonna put them back on. All right, so now we're gonna grease up the slider pins. I got some high temperature grease here. Man, I'll put a lot of grease on these things because you don't know if you're going to be the next one to change them. They may take it somewhere. They may never change them or put re-grease the slider pins up again. So you kind of work that grease in there like that. And grease up the new ones. People will say, oh, you're supposed to use this type of grease, blah, 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 blah. I've changed 10 brake pads my entire life, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that's cool. This is high temperature grease. This is not going to melt. This is not going to, it's not all-purpose grease. So if you don't like it, make your own videos. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grease the contact points of these here, just like that. We're going to grease this other contact point here. And I like to put a little bit of grease in between here. This is where the piston sits, or it's also where sometimes the fork side of the caliper will sit. So I'll put a little bit of grease on there as well. You can do a thin coat. Sometimes I'll put a fat coat. Either way, it's not going to harm the brakes. So we're going to go ahead, slap these bad boys in. Like such. Again, the hardware is not getting replaced, so you don't have to make a comment on that. The customer supplied the parts. If I supply the parts, I still don't replace the hardware 9 times out of 10, because a lot of times the old hardware works better just because it's already form fitted to what's going on. The customer is not replacing the rotor either. The rotor is good. You can tell if the rotor is bad most times by if it has a lip. Now, if we were at the dealership, they would probably resurface the rotor, and but most people don't want to do that. They want to save themselves a little bit of extra bread. More power to them. If you don't like it, you could do it a different way. Okay, so those brake pads are in there. Now before we put this piston back in here, the piston is still compressed out a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and push it back in. I'm going to show you a method I use that isn't necessary, but it's quicker. You're going to get your old brake, set it right there. You're going to use your C-clamp, and you're going to compress it in further with the clamp until it's nice and flat. And once it's flat, you will actually be able to fit the caliper the rest of the way on. Now, if you didn't know, the only time you're going to really have to ever bleed the brakes is if you open the brake line. If you do not open the brake line, no air can get into the brake line, so you do not have to bleed the brakes. All right. Now that that's taken care of, I'm going to take my slider pins back out so I can reinstall the caliper. That goes on easy. You're going to push your little rubbers in. Also, if you like to work with gloves, that's fine too. Me, I'm a mechanic. We learned mechanics out here. We're mobile. We don't really care about our hands being dirty. We go home and our wives complain about us dirtying up the house, but we're paying bills, so what does it matter? So now this is on place. All we're going to do is re-tighten up the caliper bolts. And that, my friends, is how you will replace your brakes on the 06 Monte-Carlo supercharged, or it's a 2000 to 2006 Impala Monte-Carlo. That's how you're going to replace the front brakes on them. So if this helped y'all, like the channel, subscribe to the channel for sure. It helps us to grow and make content like this. And tune in for all of our shorts and all of our other videos. We're going to be doing the back brakes and also finishing the other side of the front brakes. So until the next video, guys.